Hello, agent student, and welcome to the distance learning version of Introduction to Trigonometry, hosted by Bill Witte. Your job, should you decide to accept it, is to watch a series of videos, followed by some online homeworks, and a midterm exam, and a final exam. What I'm going to do right now is give you about a 15-minute flavor of what those videos will be like, followed by the actual specifics of how the course is run. So hang in with me and we'll begin. Here we go.
It's always best to start at the beginning.
Let's start with the basic knowledge of trigonometry, and that is that any right triangle, of course, starts with a right angle. Okay, so that's a right angle. We know that means it's 90 degrees. We may not say that all the time. We may put a square. Okay, if you see that, that means it's a 90-degree angle. Even if it doesn't look like one, it is. Okay, the square is telling you that. So it starts with that right angle.
I know that, dude.
And then there's another side that is called the hypotenuse. Now, the two sides that make up the right angle are called the legs, and as I just said, the other side is called the...
Excuse me, Professor Brady.
You're going to need to remember that, the hypotenuse. Okay, so these are the three sides. Now, I got to tell you a story. So the legend goes about this gentleman, Pythagarus. That's Pythagoras. I didn't have any better picture because he was... he lived back in Greek days many, many, many years ago. Okay? And all the Greeks did basically all day, they say, was partied. And he wasn't much into partying. He liked to sit around and try to come up with mathematical inventions and all kinds of other inventions. So he would be drawing in the dirt often. And one day, so the legend goes, he was drawing in the dirt trying to create a design of a window for a friend. And it was a window that was a square window of sides A plus B. Now remember, a square, all the sides are the same. So if it was of sides A plus B on that side, it was also on that side. Okay? And then he thought, well, I'm going to make some panes for this window. So he drew some panes. And then he started drawing some more. And he broke up the window into pieces of glass. And he noticed that this full, in this case blue, window was made up of two squares. The little one, area of A times A, which would be A squared, and a bigger one, which would be B squared. Oh, and four triangles of sides A, B, C. Four right triangles. Okay? And he would do that day after day after day. Well,
Prepare to be astonished.
one day, our friend Pythagoras chose to go to the parties. And he wasn't real good with parties. And he had a few. And he got mixed up. And he tried to redraw his picture in the same dirt that he was using yesterday. And it wasn't the same. It was the same square. But he mixed up his A and his B. It was still the same size, a square of sides A plus B. But when he tried to connect the panes, this is the picture he got. Well, what do you know? This time was the same blue square. He ended up with only one square. Of course, the area of that square was C squared. But he still had those same four right triangles of sides A plus B, or A, B, and C. And then he thought to himself, what if I take away those four triangles? Well, at least the second day, if I took away the four triangles, what would I be left with? I'd be left with that area C squared, wouldn't I? And he thought, well, wait a minute, what about...
Are you pondering what I'm pondering?
Think about yesterday. If today I start with the same blue square and take away the same four triangles, and yesterday...
Oh, I can't take it anymore.
Come on now, I start with the same blue square and take away those same four triangles. Yesterday, I started with the same thing, I took away the same thing, and what was I left with?
It is a lie.
A squared plus b squared. So if I started with the same thing and took away the same thing, son of a gun, what I'm left with must be the same. And there's a little bit more to it, but he concluded that for any right triangle, a squared plus b squared, that's the legs, must always equal
But now you know
c squared.
the rest of the story.
What do you know?
His brain is gone.
Let me give you an example. In this case, the legs are 3 and 4, aren't they? So 3 squared plus 4 squared should equal the hypotenuse squared. 3 squared, of course, is 9, plus 4 squared is 16, and son of a gun,
Believe it or not.
it does work. And you might say, well, geez, what good is this? What is this going to help me?
What would you do with a brain if you had one?
Well, I can find a missing side without measuring it if I know the Pythagorean theorem. For instance, with this triangle, 1 squared plus 2 squared, let's see, that's 1 plus 2 squared is 4, is 5. So 5 is that hypotenuse squared. And you might say, well, there is no number squared that equals 5. Ah, yes, there is. The square root of 5, which is a number.
You just want to be.
And you just found that number without measuring. You might say, well, why didn't I just measure? Well, this 1 and this 2 may not be 1 inch or 1 foot. It may be 1 mile. It may be difficult. It may be 1 mile across water or through space. It may be very difficult to measure. So this is going to be of great use. Now,
Well, here's another nice mess you've got.
in this case, you're going to use the Pythagorean theorem, but we're going to subtract, aren't we? Because we want to find a leg. So it'll be not a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but we want to know that leg. So it'll be c squared minus a squared. And in this case, it'll be 2 squared minus 1 squared, and that side will end up being the number squared that equals 3, which I hope you appreciate is the square root of 3, which is a number. So this is very useful. I hope you appreciate.
Well, isn't that special?
And we have other special triangles I want to look at.
Well, ooh-la-dee-da.
Now here's a special right triangle where the legs are the same. And it's going to be what we call the 45-45-90 triangle. Now we can use the Pythagorean theorem to always find out what the ratio of these three sides will be. Of course, 1 squared plus 1 squared, or 1 plus 1, is 2. So that hypotenuse is always going to be,
Hey, that's just crazy enough to work.
it's always going to be in a ratio of the square root of 2. 1 to 1 to square root of 2. You can memorize that if you want, or, as you see, since you know the legs are the same, you can just use the Pythagorean theorem to, quote, derive it if you would. Okay?
Woohoo! Come to Papa.
But a lot of people just memorize that.
Now what am I gonna do?
Here's another special one that isn't even a right triangle. And we are studying right triangles here, but I just wanted to start with this. This is called the equilateral triangle, where all the angles are the same and all the sides are the same. Now I'm going to start off with making the sides 2. I could have started off with making them anything, but I'm going to choose 2 because it's easy to divide by 2. And I'm going to take part of this that is a right triangle and see if you can see what I'm going to do.
No problemo.
I'm going to cut it in half, and of course the bottom was 2, so each of the halves is going to be 1 and 1. And that top angle was 60, so each of the angles will be 30 and 30, won't it? Now let's look at the right triangle part of this. Guess where it is?
Now I use my secret weapon.
Well, now we have half of that equilateral triangle makes a right triangle, and we can use the Pythagorean theorem.
I'm back, baby.
We already did this, didn't we? Remember? You use subtraction. It'll be c squared minus a squared, or 2 squared minus 1 squared, or 4 minus 1. That leg will always be in a ratio of 1 to 2
Excellent.
to square root of 3.
Hey, this is great, man.
Now I know that's the number 1.732, but you'll see any 30, 60, 90 triangle will always be in a ratio of 1 to 2 to square root of 3. once again, you can kind of memorize it, or you can use the Pythagorean theorem and remember that that hypotenuse is always twice that lower leg, because if you put the two together, you get that equilateral triangle. Some people like to memorize it, like I say. Okay?
Yes, you're in deep dough now.
Okay, well, we'll see if you know it. Your job, and this will be a typical homework, is to tell me what's this side and what's this side. Well, you got to know a little bit more than the Pythagorean theorem, don't you? Because you need at least two sides to do that. Well,
Allow me to demonstrate.
I'm going to say that that lower leg is 5. I remember from the ratios that the hypotenuse is always double it in the 30, 60, 90 triangle. And now I can just say I multiply by square root of 3. If I'm a memorizing type of person, just say take that 5 and multiply it by the square root of 3. Just in case you're not a memorizing type of person, we could have said,
Are you pondering what I'm pondering?
use the Pythagorean theorem. 10 squared minus 5 squared, let's see. We get 100 minus 25, we get 75. I don't know, wait a minute. So that squared is 75, so the answer I would think on that longer leg is the square root of 75. But don't forget, we have to break that into its perfect square and what's left over. And what is the square root of 25? But 5. So we do still get you could use the Pythagorean theorem to still get the same answer of 5 radical 3. Either way.
Pay attention, son. This is for your own good.
Now, let's get to the actual trig functions. Any acute angle in a right triangle, there's the right angle. We're going to define the sides in a different way. This side has always been the same thing it's always been.
I know that, dude.
It's going to be the hypotenuse. But
Do you mind telling me what this is all about, Mr.?
if we talk about this angle right here, how do we know one leg from the other? Well, we're going to give you some words to do that. This leg right here, which is kind of across the triangle from the angle that I'm talking about. So I'm going to say that's the opposite leg. Okay? And the other one, which is actually part of the angle I'm talking about, I'm going to say, or right next to it,
Certainly.
we're going to call the adjacent leg. Okay? And you'll need to know those terms.
Direction unclear. Please repeat request.
Well, let's do it again.
Hold on, little fire.
This time, let's talk about the sides in relation to this angle up here. Well, this side is still the same thing.
I know that, dude.
That's still the hypotenuse. But this guy here, he's a leg. Now he's across from the angle. He used to be the adjacent, but we're talking about a different angle now. So he'll be the opposite. Okay, see how he's opposite the triangle from the angle we're talking about? And now this leg
You are correct, sir.
will be the new adjacent leg. And that's very important for you to note that. Okay?
Throw me a frickin' bone here. I'm the boss. Need the info.
Okay, now the reason we need to define these is that the trigonometry functions are going to be defined using these words.
And you're gonna do it because I said
You're
so.
absolutely going to have to memorize all 6 of these. There's 6 possible different things, and here they are. The tangent of an angle is defined as the length of the opposite leg over the length of the adjacent leg, or opposite over adjacent. The sine of an angle is defined as the length of the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. And the cosine is defined as the length of the adjacent leg over the hypotenuse, the length of the hypotenuse. Okay, and there's 3 others.
Ay, caramba.
Yeah, we're going to have to know all 6. The cotangent is the adjacent over the opposite. Cotangent, we might hopefully notice, is the reciprocal of the tangent. The secant is the hypotenuse over the adjacent, which, believe it or not, is the reciprocal of the cosine. Not important now, but just note that. And the cosecant is the hypotenuse over the opposite, which is the reciprocal or the flip of the sine. Okay?
Let's play. Here we go.
Okay, so if I gave you this triangle, I might wanted to know what the tangent of 60 degrees. Well, by definition, the tangent of 60 degrees is the opposite leg. You see where the 60 is. So the opposite leg would be square root of 3 over the adjacent leg, in this case, which is 1. So the tangent of 60 degrees will come out to whatever number the square root of 3 over 1 is. The sine would be the opposite over the hypotenuse. Okay, that's for 60 now. The opposite of 60 is square root of 3, and the hypotenuse in this case is 2. And the cosine would be the adjacent over the hypotenuse, or 1 over 2. Now, all of these come out to numbers, and you're going to be able to use your calculator to find them, okay? But the way that they actually came about was ratios of sides of right triangles.
Whoa, slow down, egghead.
Now, consider the cotangent. The cotangent is the adjacent over the opposite. The secant is the hypotenuse over the adjacent. It's all just filling in numbers for sides, isn't it? But what are you going to have to know? You're going to have to memorize what the heck is the secant, what the heck is the cotangent, and the cosecant, etc. Okay? After that, you can use your calculator. And these do actually come out to numbers. Okay? When you put them into the calculator. Now, if we flip things around and we talk about 30 degrees rather than 60, well, now we have a different opposite, don't we? So we should get a different answer. For instance, the cotangent of 30, you got to remember, the cotangent is adjacent over opposite. See if we don't have here, for 30, the adjacent, who's adjacent to 30 this time? The square root of 3, over the opposite, which is 1. Okay? The cosine of 30 is the adjacent over the opposite. No, you just have to, over the hypotenuse, I'm sorry. Just have to look at the triangle and find what is the adjacent, what is the hypotenuse. You'll have to know what those words mean in relation to 30 degrees. How about the sine? The sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so in this case, the sine of 30 degrees will be 1 over 2. And son of a gun, I'll bet you if you put in the sine of 30 into your calculator, well, you won't get 1 over 2. You'll get 0.5. Okay? Now, you're going to be doing a boatload of these in the homework. So whether you like it or not, you're probably going to memorize these ratios anyway. But let's just do a couple more. This time, let's not use 30 and 60. Let's go back to our 45, 45, 90 triangle and figure out the 6 functions. Okay? Note that in this case, it really doesn't matter which angle I use because the opposite is equal to the adjacent leg, isn't it?
No, I can't take it. I can't take it, Jerry. It's too much.
We can do it. It's not too bad if you just memorize those 6 functions. The tan of 45, the tangent of 45 will be the opposite over the adjacent. Well, if it doesn't matter which 45 I use, the opposite is going to be 1 and the adjacent is going to be 1. So it'll be 1 over 1. The sine of 45 will be the opposite over the hypotenuse, which will be 1 over the square root of 2. And 45 actually is the one angle whose cosine is the same as his sine. The cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Why would that be? Because it's the only angle whose opposite leg is the same as his adjacent leg. Okay? And once again, they come out to usable numbers. I'll show you next class why and how we use those numbers. Very useful. Okay?
Now you listen to me. I want details, and I want them right now.
Okay, that's enough of that. You get the idea how you'll be watching the shows, I hope. Let me give you how you're going to be graded.
Pay attention, boys. I'll show you how it's done.
This class is going to be graded based on homeworks, which you'll do online, practice tests, which you'll do online, and 2 tests, a midterm and a final, which you will take at the assessment center. All that will add up to 100% of your grade. There it is, okay? But
I know that, dude.
I'm going to use the regular grading scale.
And you're going to do it because I said so.
Please note that you're going to have, if you're one of those people that don't do the homework and you've made it this far just on your brains, it's not going to work anymore. This class is the gateway to upper math. So you note the homework adds up to 32%. You cannot pass this class if you don't do all the homework. So please decide right now that you are going to do the homework or you're going to drop the class. You cannot pass this class unless you do all the homework, just like the next class, pre-calculus and calculus and so on. And that's why we do it this way. So pay attention and I'll show you how to do just that.
Oh, good grief.
The tests, the midterm and the final, are going to be very much like the practice test that you'll take online, okay? Which is why if you go into the weights, you'll see that the practice tests are worth twice as much as your homeworks, okay? So if there's any problems you can't do in the practice test, you better contact me and I'll have to show you how to do it, because you are going to see it again, okay? And all tests, the midterm and the final, are taken only at the Rockville Assessment Center. Make sure you go to the Rockville Assessment Center only. Okay? Note that it's in room 14 of the Student Center building on the Rockville campus. Okay? And also, a lot of people have problems with this. Note that it closes early on Fridays. Okay? You can only take the test, obviously, when it's open. I chose it because it's open on some Saturdays, but you'll have to call them to find out when it's open. It's usually every other Saturday, but you never can tell which one. So call before you go. Don't want to waste your trip. Okay, but that's where you'll take your midterm and your final, and it'll actually be on paper. And they're going to want a picture ID from you. Okay, so you can't send your sister or anything.
That's the last straw. Now I use my secret weapon.
You will be allowed to use on those tests, and you will have to use on those tests and your homework, a TI-83. You will not be allowed to use a TI-89. So make sure you have a TI-83. I will also be covering how to do a TI-82, but you'll need a TI-83 eventually in pre-cal, so you might as well get it. Okay, if you need help, remember, you paid for me. Email me at bill.witte@montgomerycollege.edu. Okay, don't be afraid to. That's what I do all day. I answer emails. But I ask you, please sign your name. Okay, I get so many emails from the Velvet Bear or Cutie 429. I don't know who that is. Okay, I'm not going to talk to that person. I want you to sign your actual name. And don't send me a thank you email, please. If you have a question, I'm happy to answer it, but I answer many, many emails every day, and the first thing I do with a thank you email is delete it. So please don't waste both of our times. You paid for me. You don't have to thank me. My home phone number is 301-989-1432, and you can call me there, but I'm much better with email. And the other thing is, you better call me before 8 p.m. because after then, my wife answers the phone, and you wouldn't want to deal with her after 8 p.m. Okay? But otherwise, call me anytime before 8, and I'll talk to you for a long time. But I go to bed at 8, so because I get up early. So, as I say, don't be afraid to call me, but I'm much better with email.
It is alive.
Now, we have a web page that you must have gotten to, and it's easy to remember. It's at www.montgomerycollege.edu/trigonometry. And what you can do at this web page is you can look for the syllabus, okay, and see what I've just shown you. You can view the TV shows. You can view, of course, this orientation that you're watching now, or you can link to the actual homework website, which I'll be talking about in just a second. Okay? Don't be afraid to do that, by all means.
Hey, Doc, wait. I want to ask you something.
I know, of course, I got to tell you, how do you actually do the homework after you've watched the videos? And I expect you to watch the videos, first of all. Okay? Don't just go and try to do the homework. The homework is done at a web page at www.mathexcel.com. Okay? And when you get there, you'll need a login name and password, and we'll talk about that in a second. But basically the idea is once you log in, you'll be able to go to any of several homeworks.
Prepare to be astonished.
And they will give you a problem to do, and you can move amongst the problems in the top there. And if you look along the right here, you can actually get help from the software. You can actually view an example like that problem. You can watch a video other than mine. I wish you wouldn't. You can jump to pages in the textbook, which I don't think is that good. Or, here's a big kicker, it's a quick way to email me. That's the Ask My Instructor option. Okay? And that will actually type up the problem for you to send to me, and then all you have to do is send it to me and say, I don't know what to do, kind of a thing. Okay? You don't have to spend time typing the problem, which is great. Okay? It's almost too good to be true. And you'll do this, and the cool as a mule thing is, once you get as many chances as you need to get the question right. So I expect you to get 100 on your homework. You sissy on you if you don't do that. Okay? With my help, with the software help, etc. You get as many chances as you want. Okay? Now, to begin, you'll need to go to the bookstore, any Montgomery College bookstore, and buy an access code to actually get a login name and password, and then come to this page, this mathexcel.com, and register and get yourself a login name. Okay? Or if you have a credit card, you don't need to go to the bookstore and get that access code. You can just go right to the web page and buy access directly through MathExcel. Okay, however you want to do it. Okay, anyway, once you have that, you will establish yourself an actual login name and password. Now, if you are taking an algebra course and have an access name, you can't use that one. You'll have to get a second one for this class, because if you have the first one and you switch to this class, you'll lose all your grades from the Math 103 or whatever. Okay, so you'll have to have a second login name. Make sure it's different from your original one. Okay, now I'm going to put this in. Once I have my login name, I'll be typical student. Okay, and I'll put in my password, and I'll log in. And you'll have to do that before you can do any homework. Now, when I get there, I'll get this graphic and I'll enter MathExcel. And the next thing you'll have to do, well, you'll have two major things you have to do once you have actually got your password, is you're going to have to enroll in this class. Okay? See this button right here? I'm going to enroll in a new class. That's the first thing. Let's see, what do you want to do in MathExcel? I want to enroll in my instructor's course. So I'll click there, and based on the zip code that you put in, it's going to give you the school, Montgomery College. And I'll choose Montgomery College. I'll choose the instructor, in this case, Bill Witte. And I have a couple courses, so I want you to choose Introduction to Trigonometry for this course. Once you've chosen that, you'll click Enroll, and it will put your name in my gradebook. And any of your homework will automatically go into my gradebook. Okay? The other thing you'll have to do is run the installation wizard, or you won't be able to do the homework. So make sure you run the installation wizard. I'm not going to go through it now because I've already done it on my computer. And once you've done that, you'll click here to do it. Go through the steps. It'll help you through it. Call me if you have a problem. But you'll come back, and you will be in the gradebook. And the place to go to the homework, hopefully you'll see over here, is Homework and Tests. And son of a gun, there are your homeworks and tests. There's not that many. Remember, this is only a 5-week course. You'll need to watch the first show before doing this first homework. Make sure you do that, and then make sure you do all of the homework problems there if you want full credit. And you'll have to get them all right. You get several chances to do that. Then you'll watch the next video. Okay? Okay. Note that there's a practice test right after your practice test 1. You'll go take the midterm at the assessment center. And after practice test 2, you'll go take the final exam at the assessment center. Then, of course, you're done. These practice tests are worth way more than these homeworks. Okay? So make sure you do them, because they're worth, as you see in the grading policy, worth way more than that. Okay? Well, I hope that helped you, and I hope you'll dig in, watch the videos, go sign up for your Math Excel access, and dig in on the homework, and email me with any questions. Other than that,
What's all this jabberwocky when there's work to be done?
let's get to it.